their own imaginings in the sky. They want to usher in the messianic age. They don't mind if it's brought on by nuclear age. They are so sure of their ability to outlive the utility of their bodies. But just remember that was the last thought in the brain of every suicide bomber and every hijack plane. Follow the guidebook for an afterlife. Which one do I try? Which one?
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Stay-at-Home Atheist podcast. I'm John and I am the Stay-at-Home Atheist.
And I'm Stacy.
Before we get started, I'd like to detour a tiny bit and apologize in advance for how long we've been off the air. It's just been, one of those times in our lives where, well, as Stacy would put it, life got in the way.
Yes, typically.
And as Ian Malcolm would put it, life finds a way. So I guess we should have done it. No Jurassic Park references?
No.
Okay. So anyway, as usual, the music you listen to during our intro is by Shelley Siegel. It's off her album, An Atheist Album. You can check out the song Afterlife, which you were just listening to, and any of her other music, basically anywhere music can be found. You can also go to her website, www.shelleysiegel.com.
And not to forget Colonel Phil, who did some wonderful animation for us.
Thanks, Colonel, as always. This episode is going to be a little bit different. So everyone's probably seen or heard the 31 Questions for Atheists by Matt Slick. I have seen them many times over the years. I don't remember when they came out, but it's been a while, but they've been resurfacing lately, and I've never publicly responded to them. So I thought this would be a good chance to do that. Stacy will be answering the questions for me.
I'll be reading the questions.
Oh, I said it backwards. Fix it in post. Fix it in post. Stacy will be reading the questions for me. I was going to say asking the questions for me, and for some reason, it just came out wrong. No excuses, John. I'll be answering them. She may chime in from time to time, but this is kind of my thing, so she'll ask and I'll answer. Warning in advance, some of them are going to be vague because these questions aren't spectacularly written, in my opinion. But anyway, without further ado, Stace, if you don't mind starting, we'll get going here.
All right, so the first question, how would you define atheism?
So first I'll give my chosen definition of atheism, because as we all know, words don't have intrinsic meaning. They have usages, as I'm sure you've heard many different people say. So the usage I go with is that atheism is the lack of belief in a god or gods. Sometimes I'm a little more specific where I'll say it's a rejection of God claims made by theists, but that's a little more colloquial. There, of course, are other definitions you can find in dictionaries where it has a secondary definition of believing that there are no gods. I don't take that position, as I don't have what some call strong atheism. I don't tend to make a specific claim for myself. I tend to reject claims that are put before me because I think that's, in my opinion, someone can get mad at me for it. I think that's the more logical route to take. So I apologize to any of you out there who think I'm wrong.
All right. This question's worded a little weird, so I'm going to read it the way it's written, and then I'm going to read it the way that it is a little bit easier to answer. So, do you act according to what you believe there is no God in, or what you don't believe in, the lack of belief in a God? So, do you act according to what you believe in, or what you don't believe in?
I mean, I guess in some ways I do. Obviously, I'm an outspoken atheist with a podcast. I work as a volunteer for the atheist community of Austin. I answer emails there. I also, moderate live chats for them on their YouTube channels. So yeah, I act in accordance with my position as an atheist, but at the same time, that's more like activism, and it's not really my entire life. I have a family and kids and dogs and hurricanes.
Everything we do doesn't revolve around atheism.
Yeah. So I don't go around I guess the way I think it diverges from theism is, you'll see a post and someone will say, "Oh, I'll pray for you," or someone pray for my dog or my hamster or my friend's kid or whatever it is. I don't do those kinds of things in the same way because I think they're kind of pushing their religion on you when they say those things, right? So I tend to just follow humanism, and I'm an activist. So I don't know. It's kind of a disjointed answer there, but I think you get the point.
Odd question. All right. Do you think it is inconsistent for someone who lacks belief in God to work against God's existence by attempting to show that God doesn't exist?
Another kind of odd question. I don't think the basic answer is yes. Like, I think what he's getting at, the answer is yes.
Against
Okay, I
God's
got it.
existence.
The basic answer is no. I think that's what he's getting at. Again, it's kind of worded in an interesting way, but
They get worse.
yeah, of course they do. But yeah, I think basically it's consistent for an atheist to speak out against religion. That's what I think the gist of his question is. But I think the wording to say work against God's existence, that's where I think we have the problem, because I'm not working against God's existence. I don't believe that God exists.
I'm working for logic and for truth
I'm working
and common
towards
understanding.
something,
Yeah.
and I'm working against a structure of beliefs, like tenets and dogma. I'm not working against the existence of God.
Yeah.
So that's why the basic answer is I don't think it's inconsistent, but at the same time, he put that way for a reason, I think. Go ahead.
Agreed. Number 4, how sure are you that your atheism properly represents reality?
Okay, so this is another, like, all these questions, they're supposed to be simple questions, but they in a way they're not. He's asking them in such a way as to try to, it's almost like a gotcha sort of situation, I think.
Yeah.
So here's what I'll say. I believe in science. I believe that science is incapable, at least as it stands, of investigating the supernatural. Science deals specifically with the natural. That's what science is. So if you're going to claim, even if you're right, if you're going to claim a God exists or anything else that supernatural exists outside of space and time and makes no, discernible impact on our world that can be tested for, then science can't test for that, right? So I believe that my position, which is disbelief in the claim that a God exists, is an accurate reflection of the reality that I experience.
Yeah. So, to further twist it, how sure are you that your atheism is correct?
That's in a way not really a sensical question. I mean, I don't think atheism is correct. I think atheism is the correct response to a question, because said question doesn't have evidence, or the belief that they're presenting as the answer to the question on the theistic side doesn't have evidentiary support. So sure, I guess.
Yeah, and I think most of these questions, right, are
very
I
certain.
believe in God, and if you don't believe in God, then that is your belief system, and that's not really how it works
just an
out.
answer.
Yeah.
Atheism is an answer.
Yeah.
That's it.
All right, number 6. How would you define what truth is?
I will take a note from the great Matt Dillahunty on the Atheist Experience. I believe truth is that which comports with reality. I will also state that he probably read that somewhere, so that might be a misattribution. And knowing Matt, it's probably like Dan Dennett, but somebody said that, and it's pretty smart, so I'll go with that.
All right, 7. Why do you believe your atheism is a justifiable position to hold?
I don't believe my atheism is a position that needs to be justified. When someone says, I believe a God exists, do you? I respond, well, what's your evidence for the existence of your God? Define your God. Tell me why you believe it, right? When we start having that conversation, if I don't find their evidence compelling, the answer is, at least at this time, I do not believe in that God, whichever God it may be. I don't believe I need to justify that. Though I guess in a way I justify it by saying I don't find your evidence compelling. That's the justification for my no answer, right? So kind of, but again, the question is meant to do something that it's not going to do, in my opinion. Yep. So go ahead.
Number 8. Are you
we're going to need to speed this up, huh?
a materialist or a physicalist or what?
Okay, so I do tend to consider myself a materialist. I believe, and I think I kind of talked about this before in my answer where I talked about science and the natural world. I don't see any good reason to accept that anything beyond the natural world is existent. So, is that the right way to use that word? Exists, we'll say that. Yeah. So I'm a materialist, but it's not the kind of thing that I care a lot about as far as discussions. But yeah, I guess I'm a materialist.
All right, number 9. Do you affirm or deny that atheism is a worldview?
Atheism is an answer to a question. It informs my worldview to some extent, but my worldview is secular humanism and furthermore transhumanism. No, I don't think it's a worldview. So I guess I deny that it's a worldview, because there's no system of rules. There's no dogma.
It's
there's
an
no
answer.
tenets. There's nothing. Yeah. So it doesn't tell me to do anything or act in a certain way. Humanism does.
Exactly. Number 10. Not all atheists are antagonistic to Christianity. But for those of you who are, why the antagonism?
Okay, so I'm definitely antagonistic toward Christianity, but I'm antagonistic toward all religions when they come up. Of course, being that I live in the United States, most often the religion that I need to speak to is Christianity. So, of course, that's where I'm most antagonistic. And I think that antagonism is born out of just all the horrible things that religion can and does do. There's a pretty great quote that says, I'm not going to get the exact quote right, but it's something like, good men do good things, bad men do bad things, but it takes religion to make a good man do a bad thing. Something along those lines. I might say evil, not bad, but yeah, I think there's a real problem in our country, in the U.S. in particular, but also other countries all over the world, of religion, Christianity in particular, in the United States anyway, kind of pushing its agenda, in particular when it comes to government, right? Religion wants to tell women what they can and can't do with their bodies. It wants to tell people that they aren't people, like trans people. Tells people in Africa not to wear condoms, Catholicism in particular here, because it's against God's wishes, because of like one or two Bible verses that don't really specifically say that anyway. And there's an AIDS epidemic there. So I think Christianity has done and continues to do a lot of really terrible things the world over. And you better believe I'm fucking antagonistic.
Number 11. If you were at one time a believer in the Christian God, what caused you to deny the existence? His existence, sorry.
Of course.
Of course.
As with most atheists, there's no one specific, like, turn on the light bulb moment. It was a series of events. I went from being a Christian. I mean, I stopped calling myself a Christian at a fairly young age, my early teens, maybe 13 or 14. Then, there was a girl and it was important to her, so I called myself a Christian for a while.
Damn hormones.
Right? But I haven't really believed in any real sense in the Christian God since I was, like I said, 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that vicinity. I can't remember exactly when. But, I went through like, I called myself an agnostic, never an atheist. I called myself a Buddhist for like a year probably. So we tend to go through these like weird periods phases of disbelief or non-belief until we get to using the word atheism. So there was no light bulb moment. I can't tell you exactly why I stopped believing. If we wanted to have a sit down conversation or a debate, then I could explain why I don't believe. But
it's not
there was
one point
no
in
moment.
time.
Yeah. Some people have it like that, but not for me.
All right, number 12. Do you believe the world would be better off without religion?
Yes. Next question.
Enough said. Number 13.
Hold on. Look, I answered all of that in the question about why I'm antagonistic, right?
Yes.
I'm antagonistic because I believe I have every right to be, and that's also why I believe the world would be better off without religion. Like I said, it takes religion to make good people do bad things.
Absolutely. So I bet I can answer number 13 for you.
I'll let you try.
Do you believe the world would be better off without Christianity? Yes.
Absolutely, I do. I will just add a slight, for the sake of clarity, I do believe there are Christians who do very good things.
Absolutely.
I believe there are religious organizations that do very good things. And again, I'm gonna steal from the atheist experience a bit here. I think Jeff D might have been the first person I heard say this. I do not believe that anything that can be achieved by churches, right? Any tangible good, I do not believe that can be done only by
a church.
by those means. I believe that purely secular means, I butchered that so bad. But I believe purely secular means can be used to achieve all the same good that religion can provide.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
With almost none of the bad.
Yes. Number 14. Do you believe that faith in a god or gods is a mental disorder?
This is a really tough question because I'm not an expert, so I don't know what would constitute a mental disorder. I've heard people like Richard Dawkins call it delusion. I just don't know where those lines are, so I would be uncomfortable making that claim. That is not my position either way. I believe that we are pattern seeking machines practically, right? We've evolved to see pattern. We've evolved to be social. And I think when you take a lot of kind of our natural evolutionary, and again, I'm not a evolutionary biologist either, so this is just kind of a regurgitation of things I've read and heard. I believe when you take a lot of that progression and how we came to be the way we are, it's sort of natural for us to look up at the sky, thousands and thousands of years ago and say, well, this light comes out all the time, right? Every day, like clockwork. That's God. It's easy to put a label to something because we view agency where agency does not exist.
15. Must God be known through the scientific method?
I think I answered this previously in this episode, but I do not believe that science. I think science is basically barred from exploring the supernatural because the supernatural, by definition, is beyond the natural, and science studies the natural. So, but if you were going to prove something to be true, the best and most accurate way to do that is through science. So, if you want me to believe it, you're gonna have to find a way to prove that scientifically, or it's just not going to happen.
16. If you answered yes to the previous question, then how do you avoid a category mistake by requiring material evidence for an immaterial God?
I believe I answered that in the answer to my previous question, so we can move on.
Number 17. Do you have any purpose as human beings?
I believe that human beings...
we have any purpose?
That's fine.
Can't read today.
Well, that's every day. Ooh, burn. Need some aloe. I believe that human beings have the purpose that they give for themselves. Some may attribute that to some supernatural being or to, their parents, right? There's all kinds of things we can attribute our purpose to, but I have a purpose. Every day I have a purpose. It's to live my life the way I want to live it. It's to be happy. It's to make my children better people. It's to care for my animals. It's to care for my wife, to love my wife.
You better.
Right? Uh-oh. I have purpose, but that purpose has meaning because it's mine, not because some deity,
book
said so, right?
Number 18. If we do have purpose, can you as an atheist please explain how that purpose is determined?
Once again, I answered that in the previous question. It's like he was expecting yes or no answers, and then the next question he has to ask for clarification.
Yeah.
So I guess this would be better if the person asking it, you could potentially skip a bunch of these, but because I said there are 31, we'll do all 31.
We're going through them all.
Go ahead.
19. Where does morality come from?
This is a tough one. I'm not going to really get into the entire thing here because I don't think I have time because I'm already way over what I would have expected to do for these questions. But basically, I think moral judgments can be objective. Moral evaluations can be objective, even though they are based on a subjective moral standpoint, right? Like, I believe, as a humanist, I believe that morality should be based on well-being. So if action A goes against the well-being of yourself or another, then we can make a moral judgment about that because of where we started off, even though that may not be an objective moral standard. The questions can be objective based on a subjective standard.
20. Are there moral absolutes?
That's another tough one only because, if humans didn't exist, if it was just a cold, dead universe, would there be morality, right? I'm not an expert. I've not done a lot of this isn't an area that I tend to discuss when I deal with theists. It's just not something I'm super interested in overall. But I would say, based on the subjective standpoint, which is not an absolute, right, that we can come to, well, it's just what I said, right? We can come to objective standards or judgments based on a subjective standard. So if we're talking about well-being and you're taking a human life when there was no risk to you, like you're not defending yourself, then I think that's as close to absolute as you can get. That is morally bad.
Not okay.
Kind of lost my words there.
So 21, if there are moral absolutes, could you list a few of them? So you kind of already did that.
Yeah, it's not, I don't know that there are, but I don't know enough to be able to say for sure. I explain my view on morality. That's all I can do.
22, do you believe there is such a thing as evil? If so, what is it?
I think the word evil carries a lot of weight or a lot of baggage that is unnecessary. I don't think evil exists in the way religious people think evil exists. I think, though they tend to call evil, multiple things evil that I would agree with are bad, but I take a more colloquial view of that word, right? Like I might call Jeffrey Dahmer evil, but of course then there's the issue of maybe he had a severe mental disorder. I mean, not that I want to compare mentally handicapped people with killers, but I think they're, again, not an expert, but I think there is research out there to show that there are problems in the brains of people who do these kinds of things. I think just chalking it up to evil, I think, is a cop-out, and it enables you to look at other human beings as having forfeited lives, as being lesser.
To write them off.
Yeah, to write them off.
Yeah.
And I think that is the wrong thing to do. I have an atheist prison pen pal who is doing life without the possibility of parole for murder. I am sure the family of the man that he contributed to killing, I am sure they think he is evil. But he's not. He's a primarily good person as far as I can tell. And I think that when we allow ourselves to pass judgment in that way, using these kinds of heavy words, then we are allowing ourselves to mistreat them or to not care about their treatment, which I think is wrong.
Agreed. 23. If you believe that the God of the Old Testament is morally bad, by what standard do you judge that he is bad?
I don't believe the God in the Old Testament is morally bad. I believe the God in the Old Testament... hold on. Back up. I do not believe the God of the Old Testament exists. As far as I can tell, that God does not exist. That's as close as I'm going to ever get to a more firm position or hard atheism. There are too many things in the Old Testament that don't make sense. And if those books that have been collected into a single tome are meant to be an accurate depiction, then that God does not exist.
24. What would it take for you to believe in God?
Man, I feel like 90% of what I've done here is just completely steal from the hosts of the Atheist Experience. But I don't know. But surely an all-powerful and all-knowing God would know and could easily convince me. So we'll wait.
25. What would constitute sufficient evidence for God's existence?
C, answer to 24.
This is not a written test. Number 26. Must this evidence be rationally based, archaeological, testable in a lab, etc., or what?
I feel like I answered this several minutes ago when we talked about how science tests the natural world, and if you're going to claim that something exists beyond that, you have to find a way to show evidence for it. And if you could find a way to produce evidence, then science ought to be able to test that evidence. Like just as an example, because someone who's not accustomed to these conversations might go, well, what do you mean though? If you tell me that God answers prayers, it, he, she, they, whatever, does not answer prayers. But if you told me that God answered prayers, we could test that. Say, okay, well, and not even just with one particular group. All the people out there who pray, let's do a test. You pray, let's see how that goes. That is a tangible result that we can actually measure. Thank you. I was looking for that word, actually. We can measure in the real world. If those results don't come out to be anything better than a standard kind of 50-50, right? Better than chance. If they don't come out to be better than chance, then it's not happening.
It's not proving anything.
And there have been tests done like that. I'm sure that someone will say there are problems with them, or that it's, whatever. It doesn't matter. Nothing we have seen shows us that these things are actually making a difference.
27. Do you think that a society that is run by Christians or atheists would be safer, and why?
For all of the things I've already talked about, for all of the reasons I've already given, for all of these other, sorry, that was my dog, similar questions, I think a society run by atheists would be safer. I'm not saying necessarily that no society with a religious, history or background can be safe. But when you have societies practicing religions based on religions, whose governments are literally run by religion or with religious intent, saying that punishing women for being raped, right? That happens. That happens in other countries. I believe those things are objectively bad, as objective as possible, anyway. And I think that it's clear that while you can have atheist societies that are also bad, like Stalin didn't believe in God, Pol Pot didn't believe in God, like you can have governments that are clearly bad run by atheists and by Christians. But when you don't have a system of rules in place, when you don't have a book that says women are lesser, when you don't have a book that says gay people are lesser and should be stoned to death, and unruly children should be brought before the town council or whatever and stoned to death, when you don't have a system of beliefs that tell you these things are the way to behave, then you don't. Then what you do is
develop it correctly.
Yeah. Well, and then if you do these bad things, that's you. That's not the religion.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah. 28. Do you believe in free will? Next episode?
No. Yeah, we may have to dedicate some time to that during an episode, during one of my atheist explanation bits or whatever. But no, I don't. I don't really believe in free will, at least not in the way that most people seem to think we have free will. I've heard it put before that there's a difference between, my wife getting up and walking out the door and me dragging my wife out the door. That's will. There's a difference between those two things. But I don't believe that we are just, free to make whatever choice we want to make. I don't think that actually happens. I think the choices you make are based on all kinds of things. Your upbringing, environment, nature, the whole nature nurture stuff, right? Our choices are because of who we are. And I don't think it's the other way around. You know what I mean? So, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but you don't believe that free will is driven by some puppet in the sky.
Well, for sure. Well, I mean, if you believe in a God, there's no free will anyway. I mean, well, most beliefs in God. If you believe in fate, you believe God has a plan for you, then you don't have free will because you're going to do what your plan is.
29. If you believe in free will, do you see any problem with defending the idea that the physical brain, which is limited and subject to the neurochemical laws of the brain, can still produce free will choices?
What an oddly worded question.
Yes.
I answered that. Next.
30. If you affirm evolution and that the universe will continue to expand forever, then do you think it is probable that given enough time, brains would evolve to the point of exceeding mere physical limitations and become free of the physical and temporal and thereby become deity and not be restricted by space and time? If not, why not? And how does one lead to the other?
I'm not going to answer the bulk of this question because I might get this wrong, but I think that's like the whole begging the question thing, right? When you say if not God, then who created the universe, right? You're insinuating that it's a who. It's not quite like that, but by using the word deity, I think he's just kind of messing up the entire purpose of the question. He's presupposing what that thing must be or be called at bare minimum. I do not know if I believe that minds, or that evolutionarily we could exist without our brains as like pure energy or whatever. I don't see how you can get to that when, as far as we can tell, everything we are is because of our minds, which are the products of brains. So I don't know. I'm not an expert, but to me, I don't really see how. But I do kind of like the question because it makes me think about Kes from Star Trek Voyager, or Q from Star Trek The Next Generation / Deep Space Nine / Voyager. But I mean, I suppose, well, here, I'll put it this way. Without talking about becoming pure energy or whatever, any sufficiently advanced society would be viewed by ancient or like opposite societies who are completely not advanced, or could be viewed as gods, right? As magic. There's that famous island where they worship the bombers that landed in World War II. Yeah. So I can see the point that we could meet an alien race or one day become that species that has evolved to such, I don't mean evolutionarily, though that may be part of it, but such a technological advancement that we could come across as, or they could to us come across as gods. But that wouldn't make them gods. That would make them alien life forms. That would make them creatures of some kind. Interesting question, though. Finally, one that I kind of enjoy answering.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you'd think 31 would be the mic drop question.
Are we already there?
We are. 31. If you answered the previous question in the affirmative, then aren't you saying that it is probable that some sort of God exists?
Again, it's a completely
ridiculous.
It doesn't really make sense. Even if you affirm number 30, number 31 does not necessarily follow. I mean, again, we might call that thing a god, but that wouldn't necessarily make it a god, right? So I just don't think the question, I don't think you get from 30 to 31 the way Matt Slick seems to think you do. It's
Hence why I said it's not the mic drop question you'd expect it to be.
It's a very
odd
poor question, in my opinion. But so those are my answers to the 31 questions for Atheists by Matt Slick. I hope you enjoyed them. If you think I said something completely off base, you're probably right. You can email John at stayathomeatheist.com, and the John is Jon. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter and basically every other social media. I have a Reddit.
Comment below.
Yep, you can comment on this video and tell me how stupid I am. It's totally fine. You might help me more formalize my views. I didn't rehearse or practice for these answers. I did read them over, but this is the best I can answer them with my limited understanding of how things work. That's it, right? We good?
That's it.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Like I said, email, like, comment, subscribe, hit the little bell so you get those reminders. We got a couple of new subscribers, right? We got a couple of new subscribers. I really appreciate all of you. And keep listening. Share it with your friends if you think they'll like it. We appreciate it.
Until next time.
Thousands and thousands are humming. The second coming's coming. The environmental responsibility is succumbing to the suicidal longing for paradise. Can't they see it's already before our eyes? All that makes us who we are, we find cannot survive without our mind. But just so afraid to die.